Counter-Narrative News, bringing you this clip showing very clearly how the Russian leadership's Russia Today news platform platformed the most significant leader of the British far right, of the British neo-Nazi movement explicitly. That's Nick Griffin, who was a leader of the infamous National Front in the 80s and was, at this point of the interview in August 2009, the leader of the British Nationalist Party, which is an open neo-Nazi party. Now, what's really striking and significant about this is how similar the comments of this British neo-Nazi leader are to the comments of Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov in our episode just yesterday pertaining to toxic far-right racist advocacy around migration in Europe and particularly in Germany. So we really encourage audiences to just check that video out and see how the words of Nick Griffin are exactly the same. So there's several themes here, which is a total continuation and in harmony and in sync with Nick Griffin and the Russian leadership around the way that they frame and oppose the European Union as being some kind of conspiracy of quote-unquote globalists, which is just a bit of a anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, old Nazi trope coming again in the form of the 20th century version of itself. Also, in terms of immigration, how the two positions are exactly the same. Now, we are not, I repeat, we are not arguing that the Russian leadership is responsible in totality for the rise of far-right politics in Britain and in quote-unquote the West in general. That's not true, and to argue that is incorrect. It is forgive the term, but the indigenous politics of European colonialism and capitalism, which is the mainstay and the main fountain which produces far-right racist views. However, these things can be internalized by any other non-Western actor, and it's another discussion whether the Russia is the non-West. But since its kind of failure to integrate itself because the West doesn't want Russia to integrate into its body, such as NATO, Russia has instead gone on to its own mirror image of Western white supremacy in its kind of Alexander Dugin defined. Dugin is a very close associate of Vladimir Putin's. His concept of Eurasianism, because obviously there's much less problematic frameworks of Eurasianism. So, to sum up, these clips show, one, that the Russian leadership is not the producer of Western far-right racism and fascism, but has folded into and helped to contribute to the rise of the kind of Brexit type of fascism, British fascism, which is very much reflected in Nick Griffin's interview here, which is a very gentle and nice interview, just allowing Nick Griffin all the space he wants to advocate for his position, which was Russia Today's role and remains so in the main part. Two, it represents how the discourse of Western neo-Nazism can be very much the same or exactly the same as the discourse of the Russian leadership's neo-Nazi discourse as well. It also shows how the Russians were committed in their global media infrastructure to raising these toxic politics to become hegemonic, which they have become. And also finally, it just to indicate to those still in denial, can you believe it, talk about profound cognitive dissonance, that the Russian leadership is vested in politics, which is very much and violently against the basic interests of the unity of the oppressed, of anti-racism, black liberation, and the liberation generally of oppressed working class people.
Nick Griffin, you are a member of the European Parliament and chairman of the British National Party.
As the Liberal elites who run the whole place knew that the nationalists were going to do quite well, they've raised the threshold to 25 from 7 countries, so we're below the threshold, so we're there as independents.
And what do you mean by a real nationalist party?
The myth in Britain put about by the liberal elite is that the moment someone's here and has claimed a British passport, they're British even if they can't speak English. If they don't subscribe to our ways, they might have a religion which is perhaps very, very different to our way of life. The politically correct fiction is they're British just because they live here. The proper nationalist position is that to be a part of a nation, you have to be either be born to it or to be so assimilated to it that everybody who's part of that nation accepts you as one of them.
So how do you feel about the black population that was born in Britain?
We've got no issue at all with black people who've been born here, as long as people are part of our society, they pay their way, they work and so on, they obey our ways and don't want to change our country into something different, then we've got no issue with them. We do believe, as most of the population do, that Britain is full and it's time to shut the door, but law-abiding members of ethnic minorities who are legitimately here, we regard as part of our society. Very strongly that the pressure that's coming from the liberal elite in the West, the United States in particular, but Britain as well, to somehow regard Russia as hostile or a problem or something we have to confront is thoroughly immigration issue for which we're most known, namely saying the country's full, shut the doors, was about 10% of our total manifesto.
It's been said Britain is broken. Are you the man to fix it?
Britain isn't broken, it's been broken by the old political elite. This party or something very like it is the only thing that can possibly fix it. It's been broken by internationalism, by globalism. You can't put it right by having more internationalism, more globalism. You have to have a nationalist answer, and we're developing in the right way. We're not ready yet, but potentially we can be.